it, 'cause it was there. We're art sluts.
Welcome to Art Sluts Radio.
And the purpose of our conversation today, we're going to introduce ourselves in a minute, is to talk about censorship and self-censorship versus freedom of speech, and why we selected certain songs to publish and others not, and some ongoing conversations that we've had recently amongst ourselves. Ann, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Ann Wood, and it's me. What should I say? Well, I'm a lifetime musician, music lover, artist, art lover, lover of experiences and nature.
And starter of the Art Sluts.
Oh, starter of
Instigator.
the Art Sluts.
Instigator.
With Sheila Brynjolfsson.
Teri?
And I'm Teri Chalky, currently the founder of the Living Love Revolution Sanctuary and Aphrodite Temples. And in the 1984 to 1986, I was part of an all-woman punk rock band with these beautiful women here called the Art Sluts in Columbia, Missouri. And as part of our reconnection after and during the pandemic, we decided it would be interesting to digitalize our music and rebroadcast it. And in that process, found ourselves caught up in lots of different interesting and important conversations.
I'm Pam Doherty, the third wheel. And I'm also a member of the Art Sluts. And it was great when Ann reached out to us recently to want to get these songs out to the public. And the conversations we've been having, the connections we've made have been wonderful. So we're going to continue that conversation today.
So, Pam, do you want to lay out the itinerary, what we're going to talk about today?
Well, I thought, one thing that was really important, since we've been using the word censorship a lot and self-censorship, is just kind of to define those terms, just in terms, thinking about, I know that they have different connotations for very different people. And so I thought it might be good just to talk about what do we mean when we say censorship or self-censorship. And then we're going to talk about some of the songs that we omitted from, this latest, and why we removed those. Also, a little conversation about a word that we decided to omit from our last podcast, and sort of the conversation we had around that, our thoughts about language that we use moving forward.
No, that sounds great.
I mostly frame things in terms of cultural context and the changes in cultural context, because I really think a really major part of why we were even magnetized together to do the Art Sluts is that there was something missing in the larger dominant culture, which in the Living Love Revolution Sanctuary, we have all kinds of neologisms, right? Our own words that we've made up, our own phrases. And the phrase that we use to talk about the mainstream culture that we were brought up in is the fading Uber culture, as a kind of spell, right? So we're really very attentive to language as women, as feminist women, right? And what we noticed was that there weren't any all women self-expressed talking about our lived daily experience bands in Columbia, Missouri in the 80s. And we got together around the kitchen table and created an altered mood and empowered each other. And the ways that we empowered each other then would not necessarily be appropriate now. And the language that we used then would not necessarily be appropriate now. But for the early 80s in Columbia, Missouri, not only I would put forward that it was essential to our empowerment and our personal growth that we used the language that we did in our songs and music then, because it was doing a certain very specific kind of empowerment for us. And it gave us the confidence that we needed to go out in public and learn how to play instruments publicly, really, frankly. I mean, Sheila and Pam knew how to play guitar before we got involved, but we taught ourselves like in a DIY
exactly.
punk rock way. And it was just totally what we say, ballsy, maybe you'd say. We had big ovaries, right?
Sarah Silverman
invented what we were doing.
Yeah, she's, what did she say? Big lips. You know, I was going to say one thing to what Teri was saying, which is one big difference then and now as far as the language and what we were bouncing off of is there was a common language of what was funny, what was not, what was popular, so forth. In other words, like David Letterman, as Teri touched on in one of her songs. And now there's many individual groups trying to merge together. And so there's that learning process because there's different languages, as you said, Teri, for your organization, for, you know, if you had maybe a bunch of Iranian women all sitting around together, their language might be different and so forth. Just thought it was interesting to think about that contrast.
And there's also been lots of other continuing liberation and being freed from oppression things. So since the 80s, there's been a lot of disability rights and altered accessibility rights. There's been a lot. I mean, even the phrase BIPOC, which means, right, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that phrase didn't exist in 1984. Intersectionality as a term, I do not believe was even being taught. In fact, we had women's studies in the 80s, and that was a new shiny thing. Right. And now we have gender studies. So there's been so much change and transformation, especially in different cultures. Like the culture that's in Columbia, Missouri right now is very different from the culture that's here in Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
Like Portland, Oregon is a hotbed of Antifa anarchist reaction against the Proud Boys. And, you know, that was a really huge part of the pandemic here in Oregon. I don't think it's the same. And where are you? And why don't you guys say a little bit about where you are?
I'm in Atlanta. And so there's, you know, I've already touched on it before with y'all, but it's, but I mean, I think every area is becoming more multicultural and so forth, but it's very multicultural, which is very close to my heart. I like to put a bunch of different people in the room and see what happens. So from different walks of life.
Well, I'm on the Central Coast in California. It's very white. It is a college town, and, you know, sort of the county is, different parts of the county are sort of liberal leaning, some are more conservative, but Central Coast has a long way to go in terms of diversity.
But very liberal, right, Pam?
Some parts of the county.
I wanted to share something that I found. I thought you guys, especially with our topics today, let's see if you can see this. I need to scan it.
Rejection of artist nude. What does it say?
It's
you.
It's me, and I'm protesting. The Art League was censoring male nudity at that time.
Oh my goodness!
So that was in the newspaper. What's that say?
Rejection of artists' nude spurs protests. That's fantastic.
Right?
That was, I can't, well, what's the date? I wonder if that was before or after the Art Sluts.
I would say that we were body positive activists before body positivity was a thing.
Right.
Well,
because I don't know if you remember that we also organized a shirt-free protest for women in Peace Park that got an AP Wire, you know, what we would say now went viral.
Right.
That had geode with her, "We Take Back Our Bodies," with her very attractive breasts.
Yes.
And we had like 300 looky-loo guys because they reported it on the AM radio and offered free beer.
Oh, God.
Like that was one of the most amazing and empowering experiences of my life.
It was,
like
for me
walking
as well.
up without shirts and having the men be terrified because I was looking at them and saying, "You seem interested in what we're doing here today, sir. Would you like this handout about women's freedom?" And they would be like, "Oh!" Yeah, like they couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's like nudity as opposed to being objectification, nudity as empowerment.
Right. Physical autonomy for women, which sadly is completely relevant now.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah, it feels like we're taking 10 steps back for every step forward, at least in some areas of the country.
You know, one thought I had for me personally, but I also thought it could be something relevant to a lot of women, but there's still such a taboo around talking about abortion. And you know how in the Me Too movement, there was a taboo and shame of being sexually assaulted. But part of what made that movement powerful was that women told their story. And I thought, wouldn't it be great? I mean, I have my own stories regarding abortion, you know, one by choice and another one by a miscarriage that now I think, oh my God, I could have died. And I remember when I was there, I had lost a ton of blood. I was really in trouble. I was just kind of in and out, but I remembered the doctor got on the phone and was yelling at whoever he was talking to, trying to explain that he needed to do this DNC, or, and now that's like a real thing, right? Even if it's a planned
Absolutely.
pregnancy,
The thing that really bugs me is about contraceptives. They're messy. You can't find one that'll actually work 100%.
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, you know what I think.
Contraceptives are a bore. I don't want them anymore. They were all made by men. I can't even get them in. Diaphragms and IUDs falling out between my knees. My boyfriend poked his ding-a-ling on my IUD string. Then he pulled out really quick, said, "What's that poking on my dick?" "It's just my IUD string." He said, "I don't wanna touch that thing." Contraceptives are a bore. I don't want them anymore. It cost me lots of hard-earned cash. Always gotta keep them stashed. Once my sponge got stuck up there during a brand new affair. My old boyfriend came by for lunch. "Honey, I can't reach my sponge." He said, "Relax, I'll get it." "I know what your vagina's like." I said, "Oh wow, thanks Mike. After all, what are friends for?" And I still say, contraceptives are a bore. I don't want them anymore. They were all made by men. I can't even get them in. The pill is like a vitamin. It makes me ill and my head spins. But you can have sex anytime, so all the men think it's fine. But it makes me fat, I cry all day, so I don't want to have sex anyway. Contraceptives are a bore. I don't want them anymore. They cost me lots of hard-earned cash. Always gotta keep them stashed. Rubber sticking in the trash. Spermicide gives me a rash. Why can't scientists discover a way to keep me from becoming a mother? I know it's just biology, but all this monthly...
I wonder if I'm
gonna have a baby.
I wonder if I'm gonna have a baby.
It's frustrating the hell out of me. Contraceptives are a bore. I don't want them anymore. I want to have sex and still be free from hassles and uncertainty. Contraceptives are a bore. Contraceptives are a bore. Contraceptives are a bore. Contraceptives are a bore.
So let's take a moment to just say that one of the things that we've chosen to do here is donate the money and money that comes in above our costs to abortion services in the state of Missouri, where we used to live.
I was gonna suggest, probably this is a little behind the curtain stuff, but the abortion fund is by state, and there's another fund that started up called the Roe v. Wade Fund, which is a national fund.
Okay.
I think we might want to switch gears.
As long as it goes to women's bodily autonomy, I'm all for it. Because, I mean, really, that, to me, that's what unified us, right? That's what unified us. And also, I think the other thing that made it possible was KOPN radio and the collective of women that worked there, because Pam introduced me to those people. And then I was like, oh, right. The idea that women make media, the idea that women have the ability and are given skills and training to do it and access to it, that was a very real thing. I don't think I would have, that, because I'd always wanted to be a DJ. And when I went to Stevens, it was to either be a DJ or a talk show host before I got rerouted to the interdisciplinary ecology degree that I eventually got. But, I was super like, where can we make radio, right?
Pam,
so
what's your
really
background
relevant.
as a feminist, and your experience with what brought you to the art sluts, or just that thinking?
I mean, I just had a really strong feminist mother who just raised us to be, me and my three sisters, to be very strong women. And so she was really my role model, my first role model. And, I just always felt like I was bucking the trend, like when I was a nurse's aide and I wanted to be a house orderly, but those were only men, that I fought for it and they didn't want to give it to me because my mom worked at the hospital, but they finally did. And, joining the city to become a landscaper and the team that rode the big lawnmowers that only men were allowed to do. But then I think, Teri, you worked there at a certain point too.
I did. I worked on and that's how I met Geode, actually.
I think Geode might have helped me get that job. And
I think so.
And just other things where I always felt like I wanted to step into the non-traditional women's roles. And so the art sluts for me, and I had been reading a lot of feminist literature, actually a lot of Black feminist literature as well. And so the art sluts was just a means of sort of getting together with other women and empowering ourselves and being able to more publicly, talk about, some of these kind of taboo topics that we didn't normally talk about, like abortion or birth control, or sex, because women aren't supposed to be talking about sex openly. And it was so empowering and fun. We made it fun and funny and interesting. So I definitely, it was a big part of, my developing identity as a woman.
Here's our song, Sperm in the Big Canal, written to the tune of Bob Dyer, with contributions from all the art sluts and our friend, the King Slab, Stuart Dummett.
We'd like to welcome Stuart Dummett up to the stage for a song that was, the melody is written by Bob Dyer, and the original name of the song was River of the Big Canoe. However, we decided to change the words. Okay, this is everything you ever wanted to know about the male point of view of sex, about sperms and stuff. It's called Sperm in the Big Canal. You can see him under a microscope, but you can't see him on the sheets. My grandmother said it was a watermelon seed. Somehow I don't believe he's a compliment to my ovaries, fertilizer on my laundry, moving through the fallopians, heading for my tubes. What the schoolboy found was a puddle in his palm, cream on the teddy bear. He told his friends about the milky fluid and counted his pubic hair. He's a compliment to my ovaries, fertilizer on my laundry, moving through the fallopians, heading for my tubes. In the porno books they say it's hot and surging, but I wouldn't call it that. It seems to me a bit more like snot. At least that's what I learned in camp. Like a middle cherry herd of lemmings, a million little kamikazes, through the vaginal canal into my cervix, or running down my knees. The first time that it encountered my tonsils, I thought I was gonna gag, but I couldn't do it the other way. I was on the rag, like a military herd of lemmings, a million little kamikazes, through the vaginal canal into my cervix, or running down my knees. Well, it's kind of like a slot machine that determines what your sex is. Or perhaps it's more like a roulette wheel, spinning those Y's and X's. Of course, it's all up to chance with a million sperms spurting in a waterfall, spurting through the vast efference coming from your balls. Well, I learned the details from the Kinsey report and Masters and Johnson too. But I'm sick of facts, it's experiential, honey, let's go. 'Cause it's all up to chance with a million sperms spurting in a waterfall, spurting through the vast efference coming from your balls.
I was always trying to make Sheila laugh. That was my goal. So I think we do a lot of that back and forth, what extreme we could go to get the other one laughing.
So we were so when we decided to publish this compilation of songs, it sort of came up, which ones do we want to keep or which ones do we want to omit and why? And so that's kind of started our conversation about, what is censorship? What is self-censorship? How does language work with art? And I don't know if either one of you want to start that conversation.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that happened, I think it's true we're all working class women.
Yes.
Right? Because how I met Pam because I was working at the sub shop. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I had another job. I had 3 jobs. I worked at Ernie's. I worked at the arts, what's it? Ragstock. I worked at Ragstock where Sheila was the manager and Ann was the assistant manager.
Used clothing.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
A used clothing store that sold vintage clothes. And I was I still am what I would call myself, my own, I would say I'm a clothes whore.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's slang because I have a huge closet and a half. I use half of my husband's closet for costumes. I'm a big into costumes, right? So it's like kind of my fetish. And that was part of my joy was wearing outrageous outfits in public and coming up with inventive things. Like, remember we spray painted t-shirts with a stencil that said art sluts, but we put on a pretty dress and then we ripped the dresses off.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Don't you remember? I mean, I was now this is important to me because I'm still into performance art and the whole Fluxus movement that Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens are a part of, and they're my friends now because of my understanding that historically there's a context like Yoko Ono and Maria Abramovich. Those women are still in that same performance art where your life is performance and you can't separate art from your life, right? Which is why we were joking we were art sluts, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we were working class people, and I got a scholarship and work training to private women's school. And in that education, I realized things about, feminism is a thing. I mean, I got educated out of my class background. And then what do you do with all of that brilliant energy you talk to your other women friends, and then you like rabble rouse. And we're like, right. So we went to go see the guys, and we were like, we could do that. We could do that. Right. But we also,
The guy,
cultural,
just clarifying, the musicians who were guys.
the men that we were in sexual relationships who were musicians that we were, right?
And the whole cross section with the punk rock scene that was happening all over the country at that time, and also in Colombia.
Absolutely. And it was a big thing that we were caught up in. And Ann was tracking that better than I was in terms of other bands and other cities and Fact Sheet 5 and sending out cassettes and all that. But what I'm trying to talk about is, like, for example, we have a song called God Hates Hippies, which is funny, but in it we say that the hippies stole the peace sign from the Cherokee. And then we say God's favorite Indians, which is funny if you're a white working class educated girl in the 80s, but it's not funny to Cherokee people. In fact, it's very ignorant for us to say anything about First Nations, Indigenous people. And I can say now, one of the things is that I was appalled at my ignorance. And there were a lot of things that we did that were funny to us, but they were making fun of, and they showed a cultural insensitivity on our behalf. Now, if you're 21 to 22 years old and you're stoned and you're hanging out with your friends around the kitchen table, that shit is funny. That shit is funny. And if it's just you and your little community, that's awesome. But, when it came to now we're 60.
Yep.
Yes.
We've been through some shit.
Yes.
Some people have rudely said to us, hey, that's not cool. Or we've come up on it ourselves and went, oops, that's not cool. Right. So unfortunately, a significant number of our songs have not cool, insensitive shit in them. And so it was a really hard conversation when we got back together and then different ones of us have different sensitivities and different awarenesses. Right.
Yeah. And did you want to?
So that's what happened. And then
I was just going to say that, part of there was definitely a back and forth between our audience and or imagined audience when we were writing songs. We were speaking to and trying to cause reaction to that mainstream male dominated community. And part of the effectiveness of the Art Sluts was the name, and still does, attracts an element that's like, oh, this is like pornography or whatever it is. And so I'm going to go. And then through the course of our albums and live recordings, we would move the conversation from a sexual, funny conversation to all of a sudden a serious conversation, touching on so many serious issues that affect women and taboo issues, that it literally changed some people's lives and minds through that conversation. So one of my learning experiences is and I think a lot of comedians now and artists now are trying to figure this out, is how do you challenge and push society in creating without pushing people away? So in other words, this type of, anyway, I think I got stuck in a corner there a little bit, but does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, because you mentioned, the word art sluts. And so we purposefully embraced this word, slut, because slut was always used in a derogatory or demeaning way towards women. So we decided to own that word and
make it powerful,
make it, empower ourselves and say, yeah, I'm a slut and here's what that means to me. And so because it's a term associated with women, we could embrace that and do that. And one of the conversations we had early on was the use of the F word for gay men that we were struggling with, or at least I was struggling with, because it's in our theme song. And it's sort of like, okay, we're not gay men. But at that time, in that space, we had gay men friends who loved that we were embracing that word, because we were also using it as a means to empower, using that as an empowering, term. Just like any group might, decide to, what's the word I'm looking for when you claim a word that has been used against you, but to use
Reclaim
it,
it.
reclaim
You reclaim
it.
it.
And so, further along, but I want to get back to that, but further along, we were talking about just using that word just in these types of conversations and about, well, there's also a difference between continuing to use that word conversationally, say in a public podcast, because we're not representative of gay men, even though we might have friends or personal family members who are fine with us using that word. It's a different context. But going back, it's like, it's one of those areas I think that of real tension that, we want to put this song out there. It's a meaningful song, with the lyrics that we're using about our lives at that time and the people that we were spending time with at that time. But we also, want to be careful and sensitive about not causing harm to people listening, to our audience.
Could I just add to that and correct me if you all don't feel the same way, but I feel like we were representing women and feminists. We were also representing the gay community because, I've had bisexual experiences. Obviously, Teri has. I think
I'm totally queer.
Right. Okay, so
that's
but,
real.
And I definitely was identifying as bisexual at the time.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So does that change our ability to reclaim that word, or is it because it's related to the male gay community that we're not because we're women? I don't know. Thoughts?
And I think this is a place where I pretty potently differ from Pam, because I'm not only am I queer myself, I'm intentionally a thought visionary in the queer ecosexual community, and ecosexuality in and of itself is a queer movement. And so I'm so aligned with queerness that I am still hanging out with it's especially in the radical fairy community.
Wait a minute.
And should I have not have said it?
No.
So, right. So it's like, I'm super, we could edit it. I'm super invested in that. Like, it's a real part of who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm still like am I supposed to not say F word hag? Right. Like, that's a big part of, and it wasn't a huge part of my identity then, because as I found out in retrospect, even in high school, the people that I was attracted to and dated, I have always been attracted to genderqueer men. And in fact, if the man doesn't have any analysis of his cis white male privilege, I cannot be intimate with him emotionally. So there's probably a specific now word that the youngers are using that means this, besides gender fluid or gender bending, and you guys met my first husband, Larry. Like, he's totally, I now think he would be calling himself would call themselves they, and would have been a non-binary person. Because remember when we actually got kicked out of a bar for being lesbians when he was a man and I was a woman, and they couldn't tell? I mean, that happened repeatedly because he hung out with us and because he was so emotionally queer. Like, so he was cis, right? But he definitely was not straight. Even though there's not a language for a straight man that mostly dates lesbians and queer women.
Isn't that
right? We called him the dyke
I was going to say, isn't that the question mark, Teri?
Well,
yeah.
Well, so my response to that would be, there's a difference between what's okay in my community within my group and putting out a podcast to the general public where, in some of my experiences, I attend so many webinars and conferences and things on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I hear what gay men are saying about what's okay and what's not okay and what's offensive. And so to me, it's like, I totally understand and respect, Teri, the world that you live in. and what your experiences are, and your decisions about the language that you use. But in this context, with the three of us talking about our work and our music, and we do have, I think we have a whole lot of similar values. I think we have a few that are a little bit different, but for me, it's really important to me not to cause harm. And I'm not saying we're intentionally doing that. There's a difference between intent and impact. But if the words I'm choosing impact someone in a negative way, and it's sort of like that whole thing that we know about, generational trauma, and how trauma builds up over time if you keep getting the same, experiencing the same, microaggressions every day, every week, every year. It has an impact on your health, your physical health, and your mental health.
Oh yeah.
So for me, avoiding that language, it's less about censorship. It's more about being mindful. It's more about being an ally or an advocate.
Can I just challenge you on one point regarding that? So the frat guys who went to our show, yes, and turned around and left in anger, we caused harm to them. So
no,
you don't think so?
I'm sorry.
You don't think they?
I guess
no. We offended them.
I guess
we might have offended them.
So what I would say, Anne, is there's a difference between the dominant culture. Like, I have no trouble offending men, white, Christian,
right?
Men. I have no trouble offending them because they're the dominant culture, and they have repressed me. They've oppressed me. They've suppressed me.
Right.
But gay men are not part of the dominant culture. They're marginalized. So that's how I would look at that.
Thanks for clarifying that. All right. Let's take a listen to a song that won't offend anyone who's living. This is off of our first album, For Your Protection.
There's a problem that we need to talk to you about. It's a serious
a real
issue.
problem.
Yeah, I mean, I know people are always telling you about new causes and new things that need to be discussed, but
no one ever
this
talks
is
about
important.
this.
Is not a dead issue.
Yeah.
Either. It's
it's a problem.
It's a problem. The problem with dead people.
Dead people live in cemeteries. Dead people take up lots of land. Dead people don't pay any taxes. Dead people don't need any money.
I mean, really, think about it. Think about all those dead people lying around 6 feet underground in their best clothes with all that makeup. I mean, how pretentious. It's like they're going to get up and go somewhere or something.
Right, and they have those big funeral parades for
think
them.
about how much it costs.
Silly.
Dead people don't clean the kitchen. Dead people never take out the trash. Dead people don't water the plants. Dead people don't clean the cat box.
And I'm not even sure if some of them know that they're dead, because a lot of them just lie around all bloody and cut up and
That's right.
moaning, They don't even bother to get buried under the ground. And then we've got to look at them all sick
smell them? It's disgusting.
God,
Dead people aren't any fun to sleep with. Dead people two can't tango. Dead people don't engage in conversation. Dead people want to start a new nation.
And then, there's those Egyptians. Just think about how many of them were buried with
those
all that
pharaohs.
gold. And think about those little 6th grade social studies students who have to get grossed out by hearing about how they stuck hooks up their noses to get their brains.
Yeah, it's not even true.
Yeah, all those
Dead
slaves.
people are no longer afraid. Dead people want to start a revolution. Dead people are not elite.
So it's a sociological thing. And there's a distinction, a big distinction between psychological processes and sociological processes.
And cultural.
Right? Psychological processes are how you internally experience something. And sociological processes rely on oligarchical, patriarchal, those are all, that language is describing societal constructs that are hierarchical and rank people based on their value. Right? And part of the reason that we exist and are talking now is that there persists a virulent misogyny in this culture that says that men are more valued and superior to. And this is shown through men making more money, even though they don't do more work, and the emotional labor of women being assumed that it will always be free, all of that.
I mean, you just look at what's happening politically in our country with women not owning their bodies and, having, decision-making abilities over our bodies. in so many states. It's really unbelievable.
Unfathomable.
Until next time,
We're
art sluts.
We're
Art sluts.
Art sluts.
Okay.
One more time.
All right. Thanks for listening to Art Sluts Radio.
Hey, if you identify with the Art Sluts, explore our herstory at artsluts.net. That's ARTSLUTS.net. And purchase downloads of our music wherever you stream music.
All contributions and purchases will go to support Planned Parenthood.
Currently, 21 states have limited access to women's health care, including abortion, and 15 of those have a total ban.
Talking about your abortion experience, voting, and donating to support abortion rights will make a difference.
I hate to